Hi everyone, it's Ann at Martin House Flowers. So we've come to the end of the year, the end of the garden season. So I thought I would do a recap or a review of my gardening year at Martin House in the year of 2024. I've had some really great successes, a ton of projects that we did. And as I was going through my old photos and videos, I thought, wow, we really did accomplish a lot this year between building our greenhouse, the raised cut flower garden beds, and the multiple no-till beds in the garden. So I also thought I would go through just a few of my most successful perennials, roses, and cut flowers. So I hope you enjoy this video, and I hope that you have a wonderful holiday season, and we will see you probably in the new year. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope you will like, share, and subscribe. So 2024 started out with doing some indoor forest bulbs. I did a few paper whites, amaryllis, and here are the grape hyacinths. It was something to look forward to remind me of spring. And in terms of my work life and my career, I actually retired at the end of February, and subsequently in March, I started my YouTube channel. Here are a few of the bulbs that I had brought out from the garage overwintering until the spring. It was always a wonderful sign to see some fresh bulbs in containers. And in April, we actually dug the foundation for our greenhouse, and we were pretty excited about it since our contractors worked really quickly in the middle of April. Easter came, and I did a beautiful container of pansies and some perennial candy tuft in my urns. It was so wonderful to see the daffodils and tulips coming out of the ground, indicating that spring had arrived. Meanwhile, indoors, I had started some seedlings under grow lights, and this area in the side in front of the greenhouse is where I had hardened off some of my seedlings. I also added 2 containers of Chicagoland boxwoods at the front door, since we had to move our Norway spruces to the backyard patio. And here is my first no-till bed that ran from the front yard to the back side yard. April was really busy doing a lot of mulching and edging. And unfortunately, because Greg was so busy building all of the raised beds and working on the greenhouse, I managed to hurt myself and struggled with sciatica for about 3 months. But somehow I managed to continue all that edging and all that mulching. I think I overdid it a little, but meanwhile, I felt it had to be done. So one of our new garden beds was at the north-facing backyard, and we wanted to connect our Black Hills spruce with our redbud tree, and I added 2 bloomerang lilacs and a forsythia in the back corner. A few weeks later, I also added one of my favorite Veronica Royal Candles perennials, and they were such a performer all summer long. Last fall, I started my no-till bed. I laid down some cardboard and put several bags, about 6 inches thick, of compost. And by the spring, it was ready for me to plant my roses. I was so excited. I had a number of David Austin roses and heirloom roses planned for this space. In total, I planted 13 roses in that no-till bed. I also started collecting a few indoor plants that I thought I would put in the greenhouse, but I really had no idea what I was doing. I think only 2 out of all those plants have survived, but I'm learning. This spring was the first time that I had alliums coming out of the ground, and they were a nice reward for all the effort that I put into digging those deep holes for those very large bulbs. I had a failure with some of my hydrangeas. My Let's Dance Lovables did not overwinter well, and I was able to replace them with the 2024 Proven Winners Hydrangea of the Year, Let's Dance Skyview. I struggled a little bit with them over the hot summer days because it does face south, but I was determined to have big leaf hydrangeas there. I'm really hopeful that these Let's Dance Skyviews survive to next spring. So May 11th, my seedlings for snapdragons and stalks were ready after being hardened off on the side potting bench, and Greg had completed 2 of the 6 raised beds, and so I planted my snapdragons. Snapdragons are cut and come again, and these proved to be my most successful cut flower. I continued to cut on them all the way into late October, and in fact I've left them in the raised beds hoping that perhaps some of them might come back next year. Stalks, on the other hand, are a one and done, and I had hardened them off on the lower shelf of my potting bench, and so they kind of grew a little squirrely, and I didn't net that bed to the right there, and so as a result, they didn't grow very straight and tall, but I did get a nice bunch of stalks, but I don't think I'll repeat them. Early May, our greenhouse was delivered from Surrey, British Columbia. Greg got right to it. Since our pathway and our foundation was all ready, he worked on the greenhouse pretty much every weekend in the month. Every other weekend, I should say, because, with our kids coming on the weekends, it was a little tough to really concentrate on it. But he did the best he could, and as a result, it probably took him till the end of July until it was fully complete. We did run into a little snag with the front door, and if you want to see some previous videos on building our greenhouse, you can look that up. And then there were the cicadas. The cicadas, which turned out to be a false alarm for our area, was promising to be a little bit of an invasion. There were 2 broods planned to arrive in the month of May, and luckily in our area, maybe because we don't have a lot of older trees and we have cornfields around us, we weren't nearly as affected as the Chicago area. So I was very grateful for that, even though I managed to cover all of my roses and young fruit trees. We just didn't want to risk the damage. But as you can see, we were well prepared, but it was a false alarm. In late May, my peonies bloomed. It seemed early for my peonies to bloom. I think I recall them coming out in June the previous year. These are 2-year-old peonies. I have Sarah Bernhardt and some double white ones. I absolutely love them, and earlier this spring, I also planted a few bare root ones on the front bed, so hopefully they will eventually grow. These were planted as, I believe, 1-gallon pots, so in their second year, they're doing really well. I even cut a few for inside the home. Last spring and summer was my first year that I planted some heirloom roses, and in the fall I had planted distant drums, and it was the first rose to bloom this spring. It was so beautiful with its layers of mixed colors. Here are some lavender, which I continued to plant more of because lavender seems to thrive in my yard, and delphiniums as well. This is my most prolific rose, Tchaikovsky. You'll see in some of my other videos, I often talk about Tchaikovsky as well. Earth Angel, which was my first rose I planted last year. I have 2 of them. It is a beautiful soft pink rose with multiple layers and cups, and it's just so fragrant. In around March, I started my seedlings for sweet peas, and they bloomed so well in these containers with obelisks. They were such a beautiful soft flower, and I will continue them again next year. My favorite climbing rose was Kiss Me Kate. I planted this rose last summer. It didn't bloom until this year, but boy, was it a beautiful, fragrant rose. So in June, July, my snapdragons were blooming, and this was my first bouquet that I managed to put together to give to my neighbors for looking after our garden while we were on vacation. These stalk flowers were also beautiful at the end of June, but unfortunately once they were finished, they were finished. So I just direct sowed some zinnias in that bed. So we finally finished the raised garden bed area around June and July, and I was so thrilled with the number of snapdragons and all of my zinnias and all the cut flowers that I had continuously through the summer. In July, the greenhouse was completed. I was so excited. I quickly got to work on the new bed just beside the greenhouse as a no-till. I just cleaned up the edges and planted some Firelight Tidbit hydrangeas, as well as some Roseanne geraniums, some Turtlehead, and also some Ansonia. I absolutely love that new garden bed. Shortly after, we planted one of my favorite ornamental trees, a dappled willow. And here are some of my roses that continued to bloom. Queen of Sweden was one of my favorite new David Austin roses. That bed just flourished all summer, along with my cut flowers. I was thrilled to have cut flowers all through the summer. Zinnias were probably my number 2 favorite cut flower. They were so prolific, and I had so many seeds that I will continue to grow those next year. I also grew some small baby boo pumpkins and little mini white ones and little orange ones so we could decorate in the fall. But as you can see, that raised bed got so overgrown, and I ended up cutting it back because it did get a lot of powdery mildew, and I don't think I'll repeat that bed. Instead, I'll focus on my cut flowers, and I'll also continue to grow some vegetables. Cucumbers did really well, and of course my tomatoes and some peppers. Here is my favorite annual container at the front. It moved from pansies to the Blue My Mind Morning Glories, along with a few other Proven Winners annuals. And when my sweet peas were done, I replaced them with mandevillas. This summer, we also added a lot of the hose link solar lights to the inside of the greenhouse as well as the arbors, and it just lit up the yard so beautifully in the evenings. I have 10 little lime hydrangeas, which we planted back in 2022. And finally, they were ready in around July to cut a few blooms so that I could make a beautiful hydrangea wreath. Growing sunflowers wasn't as easy as I expected. Any of the direct sowed seeds that I planted in the ground were quickly eaten by the birds. So only those few planted in the raised beds survived. I was asked to trial some Prairie Sun Rudbeckia, which were such beautiful flowers for late summer, which I really enjoyed for a few weeks. However, the bunnies also enjoyed them and ate all of the blooms off the top, so I'm worried about whether or not they will survive till next year. But overall, I had a wonderful experience with my cut flower gardens. Considering it was my first year, I would consider it a very successful year. And my vote for best cut flower rose would have to go to Princess Alexandra of Kent. She has a very large bloom, almost a handful, and had a very long vase life of up to a week to 10 days. Here are a few more roses that bloomed all the way into the fall. I was so happy with all of my roses, especially the first year roses that bloomed almost immediately after being planted and continued to rebloom into late fall. Another wonderful cut flower was Peach digitalis. It was a nice late bloomer, and I was thrilled that it bloomed in its first year, as promised, and I had planted it from seed. It was a bit of a late start, but boy, did it give a beautiful showing into the late fall. So overall, I would have to say that I had a very successful year in my raised bed cut flower garden. I loved growing all the multiple types of cut flowers, and I did a video of all of my top 10 cut flowers, which I hope you will take a look at, and I can link them below. In October, I was able to harvest a lot of peppers, hot peppers, datil peppers, sweet peppers, multiple tomatoes, and finally I was able to make use of the greenhouse by overwintering a number of my annuals. And even after my first frost mid-October, I tried my hand at canning tomatoes. Since I had a lot of green tomatoes, I looked up a recipe for salsa verde and also just made some homemade tomato sauce, which we ate up pretty quickly. Lastly, I just wanted to share the few roses that continued to bloom into late October. I'm so looking forward to the spring when I will see my roses and all my cut flowers will go into the ground. So I hope you will join me on my journey as we continue to grow and learn together about our roses, our cut flowers, our perennials, and all of our gardening projects. I'm so excited for the spring when I will see hundreds of tulips, daffodils, narcissus growing in the garden. And hopefully the garlic that I grew for the first time in the fall will actually come up. And again, my containers will be full of beautiful fresh bulbs. And in the meantime, I'm looking forward to seeing my paper whites and amaryllis. And I encourage you to forage your garden, to make some crafts and Christmas decor. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas season, a wonderful holiday, and a very Merry Christmas. And we'll see you in the new year. Thanks for joining me.